So welcome for another episode of Women Lifting Women, a podcast dedicated to female voices in leadership and tech. My name is Emma Raz and I'm your host, and I'm joined today by a special guest, Chantal. Please say hi to our listeners and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much, Emma, for having me today. My name is Chantal Epp and I'm the founder and CEO of ClicknClear.
Please tell me more about ClicknClear.
Yes, so we are a music rights tech and licensing company solving copyright infringement issues faced across sports. We primarily work with sports that use music as part of their routines, like dance, gymnastics, figure skating, cheerleading, and so on. And I basically started the company because a major label sued cheerleading for copyright infringement. And at the time, I was working in music licensing, but I'm also a world champion cheerleader. And so it was perfectly placed to solve the problem.
That's remarkable, and that's quite a background. Very interesting story. How long since the company been alive?
About 7 or 8 years now. Yeah. So we've it's taken some time to get all the deals in place with the music rights holders, and then of course we had a global pandemic, which didn't help. But since COVID-19 restrictions eased in early 2023, we've made a lot of progress, and we do a lot of work with big international sports federations now.
Amazing. Well, building a company is never an easy task. So
No.
it's kind of like some slow down and then like really fast, slow,
Yeah.
really fast. Like you have a very different, it's definitely not linear. Like here's the same road is going to happen all in the same pace. Definitely not as you expect. You expect everything to be like, no, never.
Yeah.
Working in startup have taught me at least that lesson.
Yeah.
Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And whatever unexpected, it's never as long as you think it will take to do anything.
100%.
So
but you kind of need that to take that leap of faith to even start, because if you knew all of that going into it, you probably wouldn't do it.
I don't know. Apparently, I would still do it, and it's like maybe I'm just crazy. But I try to tell my husband is a freelancer, and I try to tell him the same. We have these conversations almost daily. Like it's not a linear process. It's like you have like this big jumps. It's all a matter of patience. Like this is a regular conversation, kind of workshops which we're having in our own house. Definitely something that you need to remind yourself all the time. But I'll kick us off with my favorite question, the best question, the advantage of being a woman, because I love to hear about the female superpower.
Yeah, I think for me, it's my insane ability to multitask and juggle like a million things at once.
I need an example. Come on.
Need an example.
That sounds like a story.
So right now, I'm the founder of a growing music tech company. I'm an athlete on the national team going to compete at the World Championships in April. I have a 2.5-year-old and I have a house that's falling down. And I somehow managed to survive and thrive through all of that.
That is extremely, I don't know, that is really impressive. How did you feel like that served you in building a startup? Obviously, building a startup, you also need just a startup alone, just a company alone. You wear so many hats. I can imagine that's besides the house, in buying a house like 2 years ago was like one of the hardest things I've done. I don't know how you're managing it. So great job.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's taught me a lot of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And having so many things to constantly think about, pulling me in various different directions, it really makes you prioritize and focus on what you really need to focus on, which I think has been hugely beneficial.
I've heard that before. So there is, I think, a theme like sometimes the busier you are, there is something about like just being extremely cutthroat about what you're prioritizing. And just like removing all the fuss, like no, that just goes out of the. But I'm still extremely impressed. Like every year I have this big project, but I can only take one personal project a year, and then I'm like, no, thank you, and I will deal with this next year. So that's quite remarkable. I hope your house will keep it together for a bit longer.
Yeah, we're working towards the solution now, and I think we're getting there. So hopefully this year I will have a positive ending.
Fingers crossed. I will hope for your house. I'll pray for your house. I'll hope for your house.
Thank you.
Just keep it in one piece. And do you think that you ever, I mean, you've been through quite a lot, and there's quite a few different industries, quite a few being a founder, maybe, I don't know, fundraising, if you have fundraised or self-funded, but there's quite a few opportunities that are not necessarily always easy. And I'm kind of curious if you ever felt like people were underestimating you because of your gender. And how did you, I don't know, deal with that, manage to overcome that underestimation?
Yeah, I've definitely been underestimated, and my market, because actually I'm largely in a female dominated with female dominated sports. So, and I've literally a few weeks ago pitched at an angel group, and one of the angels in the room followed up with me, and she told me, she was a female angel, and she told me that a couple of the others in the room were being very patronizing about my market. They had nothing bad out of all the other companies. They had nothing bad, nothing negative to say about my company, not one word, but they were just patronizing about the market. And I think, yeah, I don't know where that comes from, why that is, but I definitely have been underestimated a lot. And I grew up with two brothers, so I'm kind of used to it a bit. And I always, when I feel like I'm being underestimated, I always like to challenge the situation. I'm quite a fighter, and I remember when I was a kid, my younger brother was doing football, and there was a session where I was allowed to join, and so I joined, and I really enjoyed it. And then I wasn't allowed to anymore because it was a boys only club or a boys only thing, and I was like, well, that's not fair. And I think that was quite formative in my "I'll prove you wrong" mentality that I have. And I really love proving people wrong.
I completely understand. Have you felt like, do you feel like you have succeeded, still fighting against proving people wrong?
I think I'm still, still proving people wrong in many aspects of life. But yeah, I mean, even with my own family, sometimes with growing the company and proving them wrong, But yeah, I've definitely been underestimated, and some people said, "Oh, well, you maybe shouldn't speak to those investors because they're sharks, and you're not going to do well in that environment," and stuff like that. And it just
a bit like, it's a bit like, okay, so I can't. I mean, I remember. I mean, I started my career in a very male-dominated environment, cybersecurity, which was a bit odd sometimes. My dog is in the background, so if you can hear a ball, like, and it's just like bang, it's the dog running around. Because I have a husky, and she's crazy. So, if anyone in the background hears the crazy, that's my house. That's unfortunately regular, and hopefully she'll come down in a minute. It's a bit of a tense environment. It can be a tense environment, and especially as you're starting your career, it's not always the most nurturing. However, it definitely teaches you to continue to prove people wrong.
Yeah.
I had that when I started studying Chinese in college, and like I was like told, oh, if you didn't know already, if you haven't traveled in East Asia, you won't, like, everyone fails out and stuff like that. And I was like, no, I'm going to be the best. I have to be the best. Now I must succeed. So I understand.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's sometimes you're like, okay, give me a bloody break. I've been doing this for a long time now. One would imagine you would learn that obviously I can. But nah, people don't really learn from past mistakes.
No.
Not always, at least.
No, we can see it. History repeats itself.
More often than not, apparently. That's been a theme recently about history repeating itself. I've seen a lot of content about history repeating itself. And while we will avoid the lovely topics of politics, I think everyone in the audience can probably envision what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So you actually mentioned that moment of like, this really shaped who you are. This kind of not being allowed to play football with your brothers really helped shape that mentality of like, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
Were there another challenge or defining moment that really shaped who you became to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a defining moment in my career. 9 years ago, I was working for a music tech company. It was a startup. And sadly, that company went into administration. And it was, funnily enough, the same time that cheerleading had announced a rule change with regards to music following the lawsuit that they suffered. And I was devastated. I walked into work one day and was told, you don't have a job to come back to. And I didn't know what to do. I really, really enjoyed my job. I enjoyed the people I was working with. And I didn't want that to happen again. And because that happened, that pushed me down the path of starting ClicknClear. And it was in that redundancy period that I started writing a business plan. And I, got another job. And at one point was working 4 jobs or something silly like that, whilst I was building this business plan. But it's that moment that pushed me down this path, which has been incredible, very exciting, lots of highs and lows, very empowering, taught me a hell of a lot. And I'm actually grateful for that moment in time. That it has very much shaped who I am. I don't know what I would be without my company.
I mean, I think that actually is much more common than we think. A lot of the time, we think the worst of time, there's the worst of time are the best of times, kind of like saying, because sometimes those moments that everything goes to shit or everything that you thought kind of gets turned around upside down and you have to really refigure out your life or try to sort something out. You learn the most.
Yeah.
That's why failure teaches you the most, because you grow, like that's your opportunity to grow. And I do try as a habit to, when something goes wrong, and especially if something like personal, non-personal in the work, is to ask myself the question, what is the universe trying to teach me?
Yeah.
Maybe this sounds really fluffy or like really new age, but if I change my train of thought, instead of saying instead of thinking why is this happening to me, but instead of thinking what is the universe trying to teach me here, and my entire perspective changed. And I think the biggest moment is that I did study Chinese. I ended up going to China, lived in Beijing, went to Peking University, because I was sent, as like I said, proved everyone wrong, graduated the best. They sent me to China, went to university there. Well, this is one of the oldest schools in China. It was built, some of the buildings were built in the Ming Dynasty.
Wow.
And very narrow steps. I was wearing heels, went to the loo in the middle of, during break, needed to go to the bathroom, and then slipped down a flight of stairs, rolled 3 flights of stairs, landed up flat on my back.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm lying there and I'm thinking, what is the universe trying to tell me? And every time something bad happened to me, I was like, you managed to correct your thought path, even spread on the floor after falling. So this can't be as bad. You might as well just try to carry on and figure out a lesson from this. So this has been helpful, maybe slightly crazy, but helpful. Which I recommend to do. Yeah,
I mean, I couldn't agree more. There's a saying that I really love, which is, you never lose, you learn. Which very much encompasses what you're saying.
Absolutely. And just trying to think of how do you implement it, even the company just constantly. I hate making the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
So I don't mind making new mistakes. I much rather make new mistakes. At least I don't repeat them. And that, okay, so we fucked up first time, it's fine. The second time is where I have a problem with it. But the third time we need to something has to go. Because then we're incapable of learning, and that's concerning. So definitely completely agree with that. And I think if you really embrace that changed your life.
Yeah, 100%.
Piece of advice. Have you ever received a piece of advice that from another woman, or not another colleague, anyone in your life that really stuck with you? Something that you kind of carry in your heart?
I don't know if it's something I carry in my heart so much. And this is actually a newer piece of advice that has recently stuck with me. And I've brought it up a number of times when speaking with people. So at the end of last year, I met this incredible female founder who raised £15 million in angel investment only. So
That's
nobody
remarkable.
sees enough, just angels, over the course of 5 years. And I asked her, well, how on earth did you do that? And she said, well, I went to all of the relevant events I could, signed up for free programs and accelerators, basically anything that would get me connections to potential angels and investors to grow my network, and basically met as many people as I could. And that's kind of stuck with me, because at the very beginning of starting a company, that was what I was doing.
Yeah.
It was me on my own, starting the company. I was going out, trying to meet as many people as I could who might, help me on my path, connect me with someone else, might be interested in investing, who knew? And then as I started building, you go through phases where you kind of put your head under the sand, or you're busy working away, and then you come back up for air and you start seeing people again, and then you go back down under, and you kind of go through a cycle. And I just realized, well, and we are fundraising right now, I just realized I need to get back out there again. I need to be going and seeing people and meeting people. And basically since she said that to me, I've been doing that, and I've been feeling like I'm everywhere, and I keep going to events, think I'm not going to know anyone there, and I know a handful of people, and it's like I'm really growing that network, and that network, it has that kind of network effect where they then help you and pull in their network, which can then help with a fundraise. And it really is about who it's not a fair game.
That's a different skill.
Yeah.
So who it's not like fair, not fair. I think it's about it's a skill in itself, and networking is a skill.
And getting into the right spaces and showing up and kind of almost generating some of that luck for yourself.
So
you've got to create the opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it's a numbers game in the end of the day. Like you said, like meeting the more amount of people, the more the likelihood of you generating that luck increases. Obviously, you can be lucky, but a lot of the time it's the same as any growth hack, or any of those, like, we're gonna do some sort of like viral activity. Anything, like, the only tactic there is there, just do infinite amount until something sticks. You're throwing pasta at the wall to see what's gonna stick there. And that's the same as, like, that's the real tactic there, because you never, like, you can't predict it. Which is, I know, sad, but I mean, the same as meeting people or going to conferences. For my side, it's mostly a lot of conferencing, a lot of working in both personal and other side. It can take, I don't know, I understand the cycle, because I get exhausted at some point. I need to be isolated from everyone for like couple of weeks, just like, I'm gonna I don't know, bury myself somewhere, kind of like lock myself in a cabin, don't talk to me for a while. So I think the cycle is very natural. If I guess you're able to pull yourself and say, back into the trenches, time to make some connections, is really, really good.
100%.
Would you say that this is the woman that also, if you had to pick a woman that you admire right now that has influenced you, who would you choose?
So just before the pandemic, I was at a Women of the Future event. They're an awards body. I won an award back in 2019, and really great organization. And at their event, it was actually the last event I went to before the pandemic happened. And Jess Phillips, the Labour MP for Birmingham, was there speaking, and I met her, and I've been a huge fan ever since. And she's so matter of fact. She's such a fighter. She's a hard worker. She's a real woman, and she's written a few books, and I listened to Truth of Power, which is all about speaking up and making a difference. And it's something that historically, or when I was younger, I kind of struggled a bit more with. And since listening to that book, and also being with my partner who very much speaks up, they've both really influenced me to call other people's bullshit and basically speak up and make a difference. And I love that. I really love that. And I love other people like that too, who just aren't afraid to stand for what they believe in.
It's definitely not an easy thing to do.
No.
So I remember being caught. I'm always like having the opinion of not like, I don't know, something in between, and always like, yeah, I know you don't appreciate my opinion. That's all right. So I understand like how complicated that can be for people.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing skill to have. I think I will try this book out.
It's brilliant. I mean, she's now got other books too, but it was very well written, and she narrated it herself brilliantly, and I just really enjoyed it. And she does bring up a lot of situations as a woman, the things that were expected of us even just a small number of years ago, where I think she brought up something about women had to wear heels in the office in order to, like, there was some companies that like literally enforced it, and so you couldn't just rock up in comfy shoes, you know, which was just outrageous.
There's just also the expectation in uniform. Women are judged more harshly for what we wear, how we wear, if we wear the same clothes. Like anything is just, everything is more hot. Like everything is more harsh. The standards are always higher, while the rewards are somehow lower. It's always very interesting. And I think as I'm doing the podcast more and more, I'm seeing it, because when you do it alone, when you like experience only, you have your own experiences, you think this is my experience, but maybe just me, I'm just here. And that's part of the reason for this podcast, is the fact that the more I do it, the more I discover this is not just my experience. This is a shared experience. And it's not just about, therefore I need to speak up, because it's not about me. It's about everyone else. And we all, like, I need to do my part in order to give other people, help them to be also brave. The more I do it, other people have this, like, the courage to do it as well. Same thing as I do, like I have a service dog. Her name is Aurora. She's the husky that was before doing a whole, I don't know what. But going with her places, sometimes it's a real struggle. It's kind of a fight. You have to, like, people try to kick you out. It's all really embarrassing. You're uncomfortable. And still every time forcing, it's like, no, it's illegal. You can't. And having to go through that, because I'm like, well, if I don't do it, then what about the next person? And am I doing them an injustice by not speaking up? Because then the next person who can't maybe speak up will be impacted as well. So sometimes you feel like you're educating the world, but maybe that's the job.
Yeah, well, I mean, I often also feel it's easier to speak up for others. Like when I see if I see an injustice myself, I'm almost less likely to speak up than when I see an injustice for someone else. And my partner, he's disabled, he's a wheelchair user, he gets discriminated against all the time. We've traveled all around the world together. And I mean, even just getting on an aeroplane, the way that he sometimes gets treated is absolutely and utterly appalling. And I am not afraid to tell people how it is. And I think that speaking up for other people helps get you used to doing that, and helps you then recognize it when it's happening to yourself, so that you can speak up for yourself. But that first piece is kind of recognizing it and having the bravery and the courage to speak up for yourself.
I think that's the hardest, at least was the hardest for me. And I think that certain areas I learned to do it. Don't always have the energy. I'll admit, sometimes I'm like,
pick your fights.
I can't deal with this today. I'm just not gonna go there. There are places, there are like areas in London, as you know it. I'm like, nope. I know what I'm going, like, I don't have the energy to deal with this right now. So I'm gonna skip. I'm gonna however, I do try, and Aurora does, for example, travel with me to conferences and go on stages and go to Cannes, and though she doesn't like yachts anymore, but go to Cannes. And part of it is also like the visibility. If you see that you can do the job and have experience, like anything, it doesn't really limit you, or you can choose something different. Think that's same for being a woman. Like, the more we see people that look like us in position to be one, the more we believe that we can do it too. That's the point of the podcast. And last question, which was not on my list, but I'm purely curious. You're fundraising. What's the experience as a woman? Like, what do you see the biases? More women are more likely to support, less likely. Let's bust some myths. I don't know.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of investors think that women are more risk averse, which just isn't necessarily true. And some of that this specific example comes from someone basically saying that the female founders were questioning the legal agreement, the terms of the agreement with the investors, and the male founders weren't. Like, that's just being smart.
Yeah.
Like, we're fighting for good terms, and that's not being risk averse. That's
not being stupid.
That's doing good business.
Yeah, sorry, I am very blunt.
So yeah, I mean, there are things like that, and then there's a whole swathe. Not that's happened to me, but to a number of female founders that I know, where they've been asked if they're planning on having kids, and it's like, do you ask your male founders that question? Why are you asking us? It's completely different. A different thing. It's not part of the equation. So yeah, I just there is a discrepancy.
Do you feel like women tend to invest more in women?
No, actually. And I actually, from my experience, it's taken me a really long time to get female investors on board. It took me 5 years to get female investors on the cap table. And I think because women, there are less successful, hugely financially successful women, there is less money generally from female investors. And I really hope that we can change that in time.
I think that was one of my last podcasts. The main goal, the way to help women is to be extremely successful, have money, and invest in more women. That was the bottom line. And I think we are just calling for new investment in women, though I might have some people to introduce you to as well. I need to think that I might also know some people that have fundraised, especially depends on where you're fundraising. But that will take offline. And this is a great way to end. Hopefully we can help. Hopefully I can help. That's a great message to share. Help when you can. I think especially as women to other women, because we have responsibility and accountability for one another.
Build together and support each other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me, Chantal. This was a pleasure. Absolutely. So for this episode and many more, please go to www.womenliftingwomen.io, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Thank you.